The town of Petaluma, California, sits quietly in Sonoma County, a picturesque community known for its historic downtown, its agricultural roots, and its profound sense of safety. In the early autumn of 1993, Petaluma was the kind of place where children rode their bicycles until the streetlights came on, and neighbors knew each other by name. It was an idyllic setting, insulated from the violent crime that often plagued larger metropolitan areas. But on the night of October 1st, 1993, that illusion of absolute safety was shattered forever. A crime occurred that not only devastated a family and a community, but fundamentally altered the landscape of the American criminal justice system. This is the comprehensive story of the investigation into the disappearance of Polly Klaas, the meticulous forensic work that identified her captor, and the sweeping legal reforms born from an unimaginable tragedy. Polly Klaas was a bright, vivacious, 12-year-old girl with a profound love for the performing arts. She was known to her friends and family as a joyful, expressive child who dreamed of one day becoming an actress. She had a radiant smile and a warm, inclusive personality that made her a beloved figure in her middle school. On the evening of October 1st, Polly was doing what countless girls her age do on a Friday night. She was hosting a slumber party at her mother's home. Two of her closest friends had come over, and the girls were spending the evening playing board games, trying on different outfits, and enjoying each other's company in the safety of Polly's bedroom. Polly's mother was asleep in another room, completely unaware that a nightmare was about to unfold. At approximately 10:30 in the evening, the bedroom door opened. A stranger, an adult male, entered the room. He was armed with a knife and moved with a chilling, calculated efficiency. The intruder ordered the three terrified girls to remain quiet, using the weapon to enforce his commands. In a methodical manner, he used items available in the room, including cords and clothing, to bind Polly's two friends. He then placed pillowcases over their heads, instructing them to count to 1,000 before attempting to move or call for help. With the two witnesses incapacitated, the intruder took Polly Klaas and vanished into the night. When the two girls finally managed to free themselves, they immediately woke Polly's mother, who called the Petaluma Police Department. The response was instantaneous. Law enforcement officers arrived at the home within minutes, securing the scene and initiating an immediate search of the surrounding area. Stranger abductions from within a private residence are statistically incredibly rare. In the realm of criminal psychology and police procedure, an offender who is willing to enter an occupied home, bypass an adult, and abduct a child from a room with multiple witnesses is considered highly organized, exceptionally brazen, and extremely dangerous. The police knew that every passing second was critical. By sunrise, the sleepy town of Petaluma had transformed into a massive command center. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was contacted, and agents from the Child Abduction and Serial Killer Unit were dispatched to assist local authorities. The initial investigation focused heavily on the crime scene. Crime scene technicians meticulously processed Polly's bedroom, dusting for fingerprints, collecting trace evidence, and searching for any microscopic clue the intruder might have left behind. However, the suspect had been careful. The initial sweep of the room yielded very little in the way of actionable physical evidence. The primary investigative leads came from the two young witnesses. Despite enduring a highly traumatic event, Polly's friends were able to provide investigators with a detailed description of the intruder. They described a man with a beard, wearing a dark bandana wrapped around his head, and possessing distinct facial features. Using this information, a forensic sketch artist worked with the girls to create a composite drawing. Creating a composite sketch is a delicate psychological process. The artist must help the witnesses retrieve traumatic memories without leading them or implanting false details. The resulting sketch of a bearded, rugged-looking man was immediately distributed to law enforcement agencies across the state and released to the media. What followed was one of the most extensive community mobilization efforts in the history of the United States. The citizens of Petaluma, alongside thousands of volunteers from across California, rallied together. A local storefront was transformed into the headquarters for the Polly Klaas Foundation. Volunteers worked around the clock, answering phones, organizing search parties, and distributing flyers. Over 8 million flyers bearing Polly's photograph and the suspect's composite sketch were printed and distributed worldwide. The case captured the attention of the national media, with news networks broadcasting the story into living rooms across the country. High-profile figures, including actress Winona Ryder, who had grown up in Petaluma, offered substantial financial rewards for Polly's safe return. The entire nation held its breath, hoping for a miracle. While the public search intensified, a seemingly unrelated incident occurred on the night of the abduction that would later become the crucial pivot point of the entire investigation. Approximately 1 hour after Polly was taken, deputies from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department were dispatched to a rural, heavily wooded area known as Pythian Road in the Valley of the Moon. A property owner had called to report a trespasser. When the deputies arrived, they found a man whose vehicle had become stuck in a ditch on the private property. The deputies approached the man and requested his identification. He provided a valid driver's license, identifying himself as Richard Allen Davis. The deputies questioned Davis about his presence on the secluded property. Davis claimed he had simply taken a wrong turn and gotten his vehicle stuck while trying to turn around. The deputies observed that Davis was alone and did not appear to be in the commission of a crime other than trespassing, for which the property owner declined to press charges. Crucially, at this exact moment, the Petaluma Police Department was broadcasting an all-points bulletin regarding Polly's abduction. However, due to the rural topography of the Valley of the Moon, the Sonoma County deputies' radios were unable to receive the transmission. They were completely unaware that a child had just been abducted only miles away. Following standard procedure for a non-criminal distress call, the deputies actually assisted Davis in extracting his vehicle from the ditch. They conducted a routine check for outstanding warrants, and finding none that required immediate arrest, they allowed him to leave the area. The deputies recorded the encounter in their logs, a routine administrative action that would soon break the case wide open. Weeks passed, and the agonizing wait continued for the Klaas family and the community. The investigation seemed to have hit a wall, with thousands of leads running cold. But forensic science and diligent police work rely on the fact that an offender almost always leaves something behind. The breakthrough occurred in late November, nearly 2 months after Polly vanished. The owner of the property on Pythian Road, where the deputies had assisted the stranded motorist, was clearing brush on her land. During this work, she discovered a pair of torn children's tights and a piece of cloth that looked suspiciously like a torn knot. Remembering the intense media coverage of the Klaas case, she immediately contacted the authorities. Investigators rushed to the scene. The area was cordoned off and treated as a major crime scene. Search and rescue teams, utilizing specialized cadaver dogs, scoured the dense woods. During this extensive search, investigators found more items of interest, but the most critical piece of evidence was found discarded in the brush. It was a partially unrolled roll of white adhesive tape. This is where the meticulous nature of forensic science took center stage. In criminal investigations, physical evidence must be handled with the utmost care to prevent contamination. The roll of tape was carefully collected and transported to the crime laboratory. Forensic technicians understand that the adhesive side of tape is an excellent medium for capturing and preserving latent prints. When a person touches a surface, the natural oils and sweat from the friction ridges of their skin are left behind. On a porous or adhesive surface, these prints can survive for an extended period if protected from the elements. In the laboratory, forensic experts use specialized chemical treatments to visualize any prints on the tape. The process revealed a clear, distinct, latent palm print. In 1993, fingerprint identification was transitioning into the digital age. The Automated Fingerprint Identification System, a centralized database used by law enforcement, was employed to analyze the print. The system scans the unique minutia points of the print, such as ridge endings and bifurcations, and compares them against millions of known prints in the database. The computer returned a match. The palm print belonged to a man with an extensive criminal history. His name was Richard Allen Davis. When investigators ran the name through their databases, the pieces of the puzzle slammed together with devastating clarity. They discovered the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department log from the night of October 1st. The log detailed the encounter with Richard Allen Davis on Pythian Road, the exact location where the torn clothing and the roll of tape had just been found. Furthermore, when investigators pulled Davis's booking photograph, they saw a man who bore a striking resemblance to the composite sketch created with the help of Polly's two friends. The background investigation into Richard Allen Davis revealed a deeply troubling history of a habitual offender. Davis had spent the majority of his adult life within the penal system. His criminal record spanned decades and included multiple convictions for burglary, assault, and kidnapping. He had been paroled just months prior to Polly's disappearance. In the eyes of criminal psychologists, Davis fit the profile of a career criminal who escalated his offenses over time, demonstrating a chronic inability to rehabilitate and a profound disregard for the law. A massive manhunt was immediately launched. Task forces comprised of local, state, and federal agents tracked Davis's movements. On November 30th, 1993, investigators located Davis on a Native American reservation in Mendocino County, north of Sonoma. Law enforcement officers descended on the location and took Davis into custody without incident. The interrogation of Richard Allen Davis was a masterclass in psychological strategy. Experienced detectives and FBI agents interviewed him, presenting him with the mounting mountain of physical and circumstantial evidence. They detailed the encounter with the deputies, the items found on Pythian Road, and the undeniable forensic match of his palm print on the adhesive tape. Confronted with the inescapable reality of the forensic science against him, Davis's initial denials began to crumble. Eventually, Davis confessed to the kidnapping. He admitted that he had entered the Klaas home, taken Polly, and driven away. In a chilling conclusion to the interrogation, Davis agreed to lead investigators to where he had hidden Polly. On December 4th, under heavy police escort, Davis directed a convoy of law enforcement vehicles down Highway 101 toward the town of Cloverdale. He led them to a shallow grave located just off the highway, hidden beneath debris and foliage. It was there that investigators made the tragic discovery of Polly Klaas's remains. The recovery of the remains shifted the investigation into the realm of forensic pathology. The county medical examiner conducted a thorough and respectful examination to determine the cause and manner of death. Dental records were utilized to make a definitive scientific identification, confirming the community's worst fears. The clinical findings concluded that the victim had sustained fatal injuries shortly after the abduction. The forensic evidence corroborated the timeline that she had lost her life on the very night she was taken, long before the massive search efforts had even fully mobilized. The community of Petaluma, and the nation as a whole, was plunged into a deep state of mourning. The hope that had fueled the massive volunteer effort was replaced by profound grief and burning outrage. The anger was directed not only at Richard Allen Davis, but at a criminal justice system that had allowed a violent repeat offender to walk the streets. The trial of Richard Allen Davis was one of the most highly anticipated and heavily covered legal proceedings of the decade. Due to the intense pre-trial publicity and the emotionally charged atmosphere in Sonoma County, the defense successfully petitioned for a change of venue. The trial was moved to San Jose in Santa Clara County to ensure the selection of an impartial jury. The prosecution presented a meticulous, overwhelming case. They called the two young girls who had been in the bedroom that night. Despite the years that had passed, they bravely took the stand and recounted the terrifying intrusion, pointing to Davis as the man who had taken their friend. The prosecution then laid out the forensic evidence, calling expert witnesses to explain the science behind latent print identification. The forensic technicians detailed how the palm print on the tape was an absolute, conclusive match to the defendant. Furthermore, the prosecution highlighted the procedural timeline, using the dispatch logs to place Davis at the Pythian Road site on the night of the crime. They argued that Davis had kidnapped Polly, driven to the secluded area, and when his vehicle became stuck, he had tragically ended her life to eliminate the primary witness before the deputies arrived. The defense faced an insurmountable challenge. Faced with a confession, eyewitness testimony, and conclusive forensic evidence, their primary strategy shifted toward saving Davis from the death penalty. They attempted to introduce mitigating factors, pointing to Davis's difficult upbringing and alleged substance abuse issues. However, the prosecution countered this by presenting Davis's extensive criminal history, painting a portrait of a remorseless predator who had been given multiple chances by the system and had responded with escalating violence. Throughout the trial, Davis's demeanor in the courtroom further alienated him from the jury and the public. He frequently appeared detached, disinterested, and at times openly defiant. His behavior culminated in a deeply disrespectful gesture made toward the courtroom cameras following the reading of the verdict, an act that cemented his public image as a fundamentally unrepentant individual. After hearing all the evidence, the jury deliberated and returned with a verdict. Richard Allen Davis was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and multiple special circumstances. The trial then moved into the penalty phase, where the jury was tasked with deciding between life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. Given the sheer gravity of the crime, the vulnerability of the victim, and the defendant's horrific criminal past, the jury recommended the highest punishment available under the law. The presiding judge formally sentenced Richard Allen Davis to death. While the legal proceedings against the perpetrator brought a measure of judicial closure, the legacy of Polly Klaas was just beginning to take shape. The tragedy ignited a firestorm of political and social activism. Polly's father, Mark Klaas, channeled his unimaginable grief into a relentless crusade for child safety and criminal justice reform. He became a prominent national advocate, establishing the Klaas Kids Foundation, an organization dedicated to preventing crimes against children, assisting families of missing children, and promoting legislation to keep violent offenders off the streets. The most profound systemic change to arise from this case was the drafting and passage of the Three Strikes Law. The public outrage over the fact that a habitual offender like Davis was out on parole fueled a massive grassroots movement. Citizens demanded a system that prioritized public safety over lenient sentencing for repeat criminals. The proposed legislation mandated that a person convicted of a third felony, following 2 prior convictions for serious or violent felonies, would automatically receive a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. The initiative, officially known as Proposition 184 in California, was placed on the ballot. The debate surrounding the law was intense. Proponents argued that it was a necessary measure to incapacitate career criminals and protect innocent lives. They pointed directly to the Klaas case as the ultimate example of the system's failure. Opponents raised concerns about the potential for overcrowding in prisons and the rigid nature of mandatory minimum sentencing, which removed judicial discretion. However, the memory of what happened in Petaluma resonated deeply with the electorate. In 1994, California voters overwhelmingly passed the Three Strikes Law with over 70% of the vote. The legislation fundamentally changed how the state dealt with recidivism, ensuring that individuals who repeatedly demonstrated a willingness to commit serious crimes would be permanently removed from society. The federal government and numerous other states soon followed suit, enacting their own versions of habitual offender laws. Additionally, the case highlighted the critical need for rapid, widespread communication during the initial hours of a child abduction. The communication failure that occurred when the Sonoma County deputies were unable to receive the radio broadcast about the kidnapping demonstrated a fatal flaw in the infrastructure of emergency response. This realization contributed significantly to the later development and implementation of the Amber Alert system. Today, the Amber Alert system utilizes the Emergency Broadcasting Network, highway signs, and mobile phone alerts to instantly notify the public and all law enforcement agencies of a suspected child abduction, ensuring that the tragic missed connections of the past are never repeated. The investigation into the disappearance of Polly Klaas remains a watershed moment in the annals of American criminal history. It is studied by law enforcement academies as a prime example of how forensic science, specifically the preservation and analysis of latent prints, can solve even the most complex cases. It serves as a textbook example of the psychological complexities of interviewing witnesses and interrogating seasoned offenders. More importantly, it stands as a testament to a community's resilience. The town of Petaluma, forever marked by the tragedy, chose not to be defined by the darkness of the crime, but by the light of the massive volunteer effort and the enduring love for a bright young girl. The legacy of this case lives on in the modernized databases of the automated fingerprint identification system, in the rapid alerts that flash across our digital screens when a child is in danger, and in the strict sentencing laws designed to protect the vulnerable from those who refuse to live within the boundaries of a civilized society. As we reflect on the meticulous forensic work that brought an offender to justice and the monumental legal shifts that followed, we are left to ponder the delicate balance between rehabilitation and public safety. When a justice system is designed to offer second chances, how do we ensure that those chances are not paid for with the lives of the innocent?